after all the dust has settled from the spring transfer portal window, there isn't a question that one of the biggest wins for Alabama, and certainly one of the biggest wins in the nation, was Kadyn Proctor returning to Alabama. And that excited the Crimson Tide fan base. The only thing that may have excited them more was a recent article that came out with Kadyn Proctor talking about this process. And today, we need to talk about it. We need to break it down and discuss why this could be massive for Alabama in 2024. Before we dive into it, as always, y'all know the drill. I've got to hear from you. Hop down to the comments. Y for yes, N for no. Do you believe we're going to see a major jump from Kadyn Proctor in 2024? Let me know what you're thinking. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Hit that bell notification. I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to hit that like and comment down below. That really helps us content creators out with the YouTube algorithm. But having said all that, as always, let's jump right into it. And as you can see, we have a very special guest with us today, Jake Merrill, a longtime friend of the channel, someone who I make quite a bit of content with. How you doing today, Jake?
I'm doing great, man. I appreciate you having me for this. I think it's pretty significant, and I'm just honored to be in and chat it up with you about it.
Absolutely. And one of the things, whenever we heard this news, you and I kind of talked about this briefly on Twitter. You had a fantastic tweet about this, but whenever you would hit me up and we're talking about, hey, are you going to make this video? I wanted to get you on here because you are a former player. And the first question I have for you is, being a former player, I want to put you in a position where pretend you're playing in 2024. One of your teammates hits the transfer portal when a coach leaves, then they transfer back. Now, I want to get your take on this because there were a lot of people who were questioning, hey, how should we view Kadyn Proctor coming back to Alabama? I was always of the mindset that if the team was fine with it, if the coaches were fine with it, then I was fine with it. Those are the guys in the locker room with him. Those are the guys going to war with him. I'm just a simple fan of the team. If they're fine with it, why shouldn't I be fine with it? But if you were in the locker room, how would you view this, especially after this article comes out and we see some of the humility that Kadyn Proctor displayed?
I think for on my end, I would be very, very like proud of him. Number one, obviously being in the locker room, I would already have a lot of the details and the story of what has happened, correct? But from that mindset of just how he went about this process. I mean, you look at the young man in general, right? He's a young guy. It's so funny because you look at him, he's huge. He's a big dude, a big individual, big human being. So automatically we associate size in our minds with almost maturity in a way, right? And not saying he's immature, but we as young individuals too, we can sometimes make emotional decisions based on a lot going on around us. I think for the players in the locker room, especially in putting myself into that position, I know like based on the steps that he took, what he was going through. And again, you do form tight bonds within those locker rooms. That's what makes teams special, right? I know that I would be willing and saying, "Hey, man, you know what? I get where you're coming from. We appreciate the mindset. We appreciate the fact that you have been honest with yourself." I think that's a really key aspect is that he was honest with himself. I mean, on top of that, vulnerability. I do not think people give enough credit to vulnerability and how much it impacts, right? Like trust within your individual teammates, maybe family, maybe coworkers, but being vulnerable and understanding the fact of saying, I'm going to be honest and come straight forward. I'm not coming back with arrogance, with cockiness. Yes, I'm confident in my game. There's a difference though, right? But also to have within that confidence humility and be vulnerable to the aspects of what his decision process was and how he went about it, leaving and coming back. There's a lot of respect there. And I think based on obviously the things that we know and putting myself in that locker room, I would have respect for that.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think is so interesting is the relationship with a Wilkin Formby, someone who I've made it no secret. I think he's going to compete and possibly take that right tackle position. Jake, you and I have talked about this extensively, especially when we look at the way Kalen DeBoer offensive lines operate. You're going to have people in space. You need to be athletic. I think Formby is going to be tough to keep off the field, but that relationship I found to be key. Him being able to walk back into that office, him being Kadyn Proctor, look at Kalen DeBoer and say, I'm sorry. I didn't listen to the pitch. My mind was already made up, and that was a mistake. If I was a coach, for a young man to do that already would display a level of emotional maturity that I would be really excited to have on my team. And Jake, I want to get your take on this. Dare I say that mindset, that emotional maturity could make him a leader of this team in 2024. And that's incredible because when you look at this offensive line, it's filled with potential leaders. This offense is filled with potential leaders. Really, this Alabama team is filled with potential leaders, but that type of humility, emotional maturity, willingness to admit, hey, I was wrong, and I own that, and I ask for your forgiveness. How would you view that from a leadership perspective from the young guys and guys who are looking at Alabama wondering, should I commit there?
Oh, I think it speaks so highly to not just him, but I also think you brought up Formby, and we also need to bring up Booker, right? Because Booker also makes it is an impact in this decision making process, and I think the fact that you have to give a strong round of applause and credit to those guys too, because easily you can write someone off and say, you know what, screw you, you quit on us, you left us, blah blah blah. But it takes even more emotional maturity, just as you said, Ty, with being able to forgive, being able to understand somebody and what they're going through, right? So today, all we see are viewpoints clashing 24/7. The media gives us 24/7 viewpoints of clash and negativity, clash and negativity. This is complete opposite. Big credit to 247, right? And the reporter on that, and remind me his name. Do you have his name, Ty, by any chance?
I'm trying to get the article pulled up, but for whatever
I
reason, my cell phone service is not wanting to work right now. So
You're good. You're good. But Alex Scarborough, right? Scarborough. Yeah, there we go. From 247 Sports, right? Great article in the way it giving him a platform to say, to be honest, to be vulnerable, and to present to not just his teammates, to maybe the people in Alabama, but also to present to us as fans and everybody, to be open to potential even more criticism and say, you're a liar. You're a liar. Because a lot of people are going to do that. A lot of people are going to say, we don't care. You know what? Okay. Who cares what other people think? Because in the end of the day, they're not you. Right. But what is cool is seeing the guys that he truly has a bond with, these guys who are friends, what a friend should do, forgiveness, being open minded, hearing somebody else's point of view, understanding what they go through on a daily basis, putting yourself in their shoes and trying to say, oh, I see now, I understand. And completely, let's help you. How can we help you? And that, I mean, it just speaks to, it goes back to what I have said over and over when we do our lives, when we've done other videos, Ty, is I think this offensive line is going to be special, extremely special. And if you are a young recruit going through the process, deciding if Alabama's for you, when you have somebody who believes in this program so much that he's willing to open himself up to the criticism of the media, of the people, to come back for the love of the program, for the love of the brotherhood, that is true. That's real. And it's something you have to think about. You really need to consider this now when making decisions. Because guess what? Someday when we're not here anymore, the money, all the material things disappear. But what happens? Those memories, those bonds you form, create a legacy. That's how legends are born. That's why Alabama has the stories it has. It's because of stories like this. So I have a lot of respect for Kadyn Proctor, even more so now, right? I already kind of thought this process when he was coming back, but that's speculation. I don't know him personally, so I can't say. But I have a lot of respect for him now, and I applaud him. I applaud Formby. I applaud the whole locker room, Booker as a leader, and yes, I do think Kadyn takes a dramatic step in his leadership role.
now, before we transition and talk about why I think this is big for Alabama's offensive line, there is one more thing I'd like to add. If you are a recruit looking at this situation, you see a coaching staff that is not going to write you off. You see a coaching staff that is going to work with you, that understands that there is this type of mindset out here, that the grass is always greener on the other side. And they understand that you're young. You're going to be looking for opportunities. They understand that there was a lot of uncertainty, but this isn't relegated to this coaching staff. One thing I'd like to say is that Damani Jackson here recently had a fantastic interview. And one of the things that stuck with me is him saying the toughest thing he had to do was call Nick Saban whenever he was a silent commit to Alabama and tell him, hey, I'm not going to be coming to Alabama. I flipped my commitment to USC. Now, the general college football fan base didn't know that he was a silent to Alabama, but Saban did. What Nick Saban told him, Jake, really stuck with me. And it was, hey, do what's best for you. And of course, I'm not direct quoting here, paraphrasing, do what's best for you, but you always have a home here. You always have a spot here. That type of mindset, that just seems to be something that Alabama is going to continue with a new coaching staff with a little bit different style. And I think that is going to permeate in the recruiting ranks. I think it's going to bode very well for Alabama. Now, let's talk about why I think this is big for Alabama's offensive line. Jake, when we look at Kadyn Proctor coming out of high school, this was a top 10 prospect per the 24/7 Sports Composite, if I'm not mistaken, coming in at number 9 specifically. Whenever you're that highly ranked and whenever you play instantly, I think it can be easy to kind of think, hey, I'm going to come in here. I've been the guy for 4 years in high school. I'm going to be the guy day one in college. Well, you're in the SEC. You're playing against a lot of guys, a lot of people who were the guy for 4 years in high school and have maintained being the guy in college. Being an 18-year-old on an offensive line, I've always thought was just tremendously difficult because you're going up against someone who may be a senior that has 4 years in college, 4 years in a college strength and conditioning room, and you've been there for all of 6 months. That's a tough ask. But dare I say that whenever we look at some of these struggles Proctor had, and one thing I'd like to say is a freshman struggling isn't exactly headlines, ladies and gentlemen. I think that's kind of to be expected, especially on the offensive line, especially in the SEC. But now he has a chip on his shoulder. Now he feels like he has something to prove. Dare I say the entire offensive line feels like they have something to prove. I've talked about this ad nauseum. This offensive line last year was phenomenal in run blocking, pass blocking, and it wasn't just all the offensive line's fault, but there were too many sacks given up. We can talk about where the blame lies, but as a unit, there were a few too many sacks given up. But I feel like with this mindset Kadyn Proctor is bringing in, with this interview that he just did, once again, shout out to 24/7 Sports. What an article. What an article. Jake, dare I say that not only Kadyn Proctor is going to have a massive chip on his shoulder and will look to become a fantastic tackle in 2024, the entirety of Alabama's offensive line will also walk into this season with a chip on their shoulder.
I mean, honestly, spot on. And it's so funny. And this is why I believe in what I believe with what you're going to see from a product on the field. That entire offensive line is one unit. Um, these sort of stories with Kadyn Proctor, this is individual based, right? But actually, it impacts the entire line, the entire room of those offensive linemen as one whole unit. And I posted a quote on Twitter today. Ty, you saw it, right? And it speaks about adversity. It speaks about when approached basically with the right mindset, right? When you face adversity with the right mindset, there's tremendous, amazing growth. On top of that, like, you have the ability now to utilize that to reach a potential that is a lot of people don't get to. And that's not just individual based though. That can happen as a full unit. And I do think they did face, especially in this offseason, after losing to Michigan the way they did, and what everyone brings up, the number of sacks, right, from this last season. I think they did face a lot of adversity. On top of that, Kadyn going to Iowa and now coming back, it just adds an extra layer. But you can see, once again, you can see the leadership that's being built. You can see the tenacity, the mindset, the connection that's being built. You are seeing a wall that is going to be, and it's funny to say a wall because it's an offensive line, right? But truly, you're watching a wall of great magnitude be constructed, right? with each of these pieces in this offseason in the way it is all coming together. Just pay attention. This is a unit that should be feared going into the season. They'll be looked over quite a bit. That people are going to try to scrutinize every little detail. But I think these guys have what it takes. I do think this is a Joe Moore award-winning line.
And one of the things where it's tough to argue that when you look, Pro Football Focus just put out a list. Alabama has 3 of the top 10 interior offensive linemen in the nation. Let that sink in. Let that marinate. That means that out of the top 10, there are only 7 that are not in a Crimson Tide uniform. I haven't hid this belief. I think Kadyn Proctor is going to get that starting job at left tackle day one because I think he is training his tail off all offseason. He even talked about it in the article saying, yeah, I'm still working. I'm still pushing for this because I want them to see a brand new player. That's the chip I'm talking about. He now feels like, hey, I made a mistake. I've owned my mistake, but now I have to rectify that mistake. And just coming back isn't enough in his mindset, if I'm reading in between the lines. I feel like Kadyn Proctor wants to show people with his play that I understand the mistake I made, and I'm here to own that, and you're going to see an entirely different player. Right now, as we sit here and talk, I feel like 4 of the 5 pieces on this offensive line are already accounted for. And that's a fantastic place to be in June. Fall camp's going to come around. More great competition going to be seen. Can't wait for Kadyn Proctor to officially be back practicing with the team. I think there's a lot of excitement around this offensive line and certainly, Jake, around this offense. Final words on this.
Man, just again, if Kadyn gets an opportunity to watch this video, I have to tell you, man, I personally am very proud of you, but I know your coaching staff, your teammates are proud of you. I know your parents are proud of you, but most important, you should be proud of yourself.
Exactly.
Because you just took a significant step in your own personal growth as a man. That is something to be said. Much love and applause to you, my friend. And I can't wait to watch this offensive line really come together into this fall ball, figure out their pieces for that final piece, I would say, as we just talked about, Ty. And I'll say this, I really believe in you guys. And I think everybody should. And I think as a fan base, get behind this offensive line because they're going to be special.
I can't wait to see it. I think this offense is going to be special. And one thing we know, football is a game of inches. For your offense to be special, your offensive line has to be special. And last thing I'll say, kind of piggybacking off of what you just said, Jake, Kadyn just did something that a lot of grown men, not young men, grown men and women, a lot of grown adults have a hard time doing. Looking their peers in the face and saying, I made a mistake. I apologize. What do I need to do to rectify it? What do I need to do to be embraced? And then pushing to show everybody I'm going to be the guy everyone thinks I can be and that Jake and I know you can be. Can't wait to see what this looks like. Can't wait to see what this offensive line looks like in 2024. Hop down to the comments. I want to hear from you. Jake has a take thinking that this offensive line could be a Joe Moore award-winning unit. Do you agree? Let us know down in the comments. Until next time, that's it. See you.